Hello, welcome. My name is Rachel Holtzkenner. Thank you for joining our session today. I live in Fort Lauderdale, not too far from here. And I want to tell you a story. The story happened 16 and a half years ago to me. I had been married for 4 years, and I really wanted to have kids from the day that I got married. And I wasn't able to have that blessing for all that time, for those 4 years. And it wasn't for a lack of trying and going to doctors, both natural doctors and conventional Western doctors, as they say. At that time, I went to Israel for the sole purpose of praying for children. And I only went for 5 days. And in those 5 days, I don't think I did any fun touring or anything cool, like go to the Dead Sea or anything. I did do cool prayer activities. So every day I went to one or more than one place to pray. And of course, the Kotel, the Western Wall. But one of the places that I went to was the Maras HaMachpelah, which is the resting place of the matriarchs and patriarchs, the first Jewish men and first Jewish women, aside for my namesake, Rachel. But 3 and 3 plus Adam and Eve. And I went there to pray for children. Well, those of you who have been to Maras HaMachpelah know that there's different rooms for the different couples. Generally speaking, the room of Isaac and Rebecca, Yitzchak and Rivka, is closed. But if I remember correctly, it was open that fateful day, 16 and a half years ago. And I was sitting in the room. And I decided to study the Torah portion allocated for that day. Every single day has a Torah portion that is allocated for that day to study both the text and the commentary of Rashi. So I was sitting there, I said, I think I saw, for those of you who know what this means, a chitas, which reminded me, I need to do my Torah portion for today. So I pulled it out. And the third verse in the Torah portion on that day said, and I'll read in Hebrew and then translate it, Vaye'etar Yitzchak laHashem, lenochach ishto, ki yakarahi. Vaye'aser lo Hashem, vatahar Rivka ishto. Which in English means, and Isaac prayed to the Lord opposite his wife because she was barren. And the Lord accepted his prayer, and Rebecca, his wife, conceived. So remember, I was in Isaac and Rebecca's room praying for a child because I was unable to have a child for 4 years. So what a coincidence. To add to that coincidence, of course, I'm saying the word coincidence facetiously because nothing is a coincidence, especially not something like this. The Torah goes on to say that Vayisrotzetsu habanim bikirba, the children were fighting, exactly. In this verse, we just know that she became pregnant. But in the next verse, we know that she was pregnant with twins. Well, 9 months after I came back, I gave birth to twins. Pretty cool, right? Unfortunately, one of the babies passed away at the young age of 3.5 months. But I did give birth to twins in sync, in line with my mother, Rebecca, and my father, Isaac. Now, do you have a question here? Do you see that you can put in a question? Does it say that you have a place here to answer? Okay, cool. So now, what is unusual about this verse? What do you think is unusual about this verse? Seemingly, they prayed for a child. So now put it in. Instead of saying it, see if you can put it in. Because that'll be really cool. It will come up on the slide, hopefully. Okay. Keep it coming. But here we have some questions. Opposite his wife? Was he the only one who prayed? Love it. They skipped the 9 months of waiting for the pregnancy, so actually his wife conceived. So that was like the beginning of the pregnancy. This question that 3 of you asked is one of the primary questions that's asked by the commentaries. So good on you. You are right in sync with the way to analyze the Chumash, the text. The commentaries say, it should say that he prayed bishvil ishto, al ishto, which means for his wife. What does it mean opposite his wife? Okay, and then here's another question. Was he the only one that prayed? So here comes along Rashi, who explains what the word opposite means. So here we go. Rashi says opposite means this one, Isaac, was standing in his corner and praying, and that one, Rebecca, was standing in that corner and praying. So with one fell swoop, we answered both questions. Opposite means they were standing opposite of each other, and they were both praying. Which leads to another question, which is, why couldn't they be together? Why couldn't they just be sitting right next to each other and praying? Why did they? I mean, imagine this was the room. Isaac was like, Rebecca, I'll be in that corner, and you go in that corner, and we'll pray. But they felt like this was the best way to pray. So in my mind, this is the origin of men and women praying separately. In fact, there is a commentary called the Mayim Chayim that says that Rebecca and Isaac were thinking, what's the best place to face when you pray? Like, we know we face toward the Western Wall. And there's even more dynamics, like in a synagogue, which side you sit in represents different energies that you're accessing. So the Mayim Chayim says that they wanted to cover all the different energies that were available in the room. So he says, Yitzchak, Isaac, was in the northeastern corner, and Rivka, Rebecca, was in the southwestern corner, so that they were going to get the best spot to pray. Let's back up a little bit and talk about some women that are famous for their prayers. There are so many. We're just going to talk about 2. Women praying. So we're going to move away from the separation of men and women, the Mechitzah, for a couple minutes, and we'll come back to it. I want to talk first about Hannah. Hannah was the mother of the prophet Shmuel HaNavi, Samuel. And the Torah tells us a very dramatic story. The prophets tell us a dramatic story about Hannah's prayer. And it goes like this. And Hannah arose after eating and after drinking. And Eli, the priest, was sitting on the chair beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. So she walked up to the temple, and the priest Eli was there. And she was bitter in spirit. And she prayed to the Lord and wept. And she vowed a vow and said to the Lord, to Lord of hosts, if you will look upon the affliction of your bondswoman, and you will remember me, and you will not forget your bondswoman, and you will give your bondswoman a male child, and I shall give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. And it was as she prayed, Eli, he was the priest that was standing at the doorpost, watched her mouth. But Hannah was speaking in her heart, and only her lips were moving, and her voice was not heard. And Eli thought her to be a drunken woman. And Eli said to her, until when will you be drunk? Throw off your wine from yourself. And now the highlighted verse. And Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord. I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit, and neither new wine nor old wine have I drunk. And I poured out my soul before the Lord. To this, Eli responded and blessed her that all of her blessings should be fulfilled, and in fact, that is what happened. This is the famous prayer of Hannah. The sages tell us that we are meant to learn a lot from Hannah's prayer. For example, the fact that it says she spoke from her heart. From this, we learn that we have an obligation, everybody, men and women, have an obligation to pray from their heart with focus and intention. Also, the fact that her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. That was kind of what threw the priest Eli off. He thought she was drunk because she was like muttering things, seemingly. But no, the sages say, no, that's perfect. That's exactly the way a person should pray. They should articulate the words, but especially when it comes to the Amidah prayer, not do it too loud. Okay, question for you. We learned a little bit about Hannah's prayer. Maybe you've read it before. Maybe not. But now that you've read it again, what touches you most about Hannah's prayer? Okay, so keep the answers coming. And so far, I love what we have on the board there. Hannah's style of prayer. Okay. Affliction, bitterness, wept. So a lot of pain in the story. The Torah doesn't mince words when it comes to the intensity of her pain. Her faith and consistency, yeah. She was just like, I am gonna pray here. That she ate and drank first. That's interesting. That's really interesting. That actually reminds me of another more recent story about one of the matriarchs in the Chabad dynasty who was given this advice that you should always eat before you pray. She actually wanted to pray before she ate. This is Rebbetzin Rivka. And her father-in-law told her, no, you should eat before praying. You have more energy to pray when you eat before praying. So, okay, intense pain. Awesome. And again, keep them coming. So we see here, I think what you guys wrote is very much in sync with what the Talmud teaches us, that look at Hannah's prayer as a model. She let it rip. She said, God, I want you to know everything that's on my heart. And even when someone questioned her, I mean, not just somebody, the high priest, the holiest man of the generation, she was so confident, like you guys wrote, in saying, I am not doing the wrong thing by speaking this way to God. I'm not being too assertive. I'm not being too emotional. You know, they accuse us women of being too emotional. Sorry for the man in the audience. Maybe he's like, you're manipulating God with your tears. She's like, no, I don't think so. I'm pouring out my heart before God. That's the way to do it. So the Talmud says, men and women, take note. That is the ideal prayer. In fact, we're going to make laws that create a structure for prayer just because we want to set the setting. We want to make the perfect setting for you to model Hannah's prayer. That would be amazing. I mean, God clearly liked it. He was like, that's it. You're having a child. There's no way I could resist that kind of prayer. Okay. Next exhibit of women who pray intensely. And again, there are many. I'm skipping over Leah. Leah, Torah describes her as having vulnerable eyes because she was always praying and she changed her destiny, her fate. Yeah, sure. Nice. I have a learned crowd here. So the word eine Leah rakos means soft. Her eyes were soft. So that's what Rashi says, soft. Why were they soft? Because of her praying exactly like you said. So that idea of soft eyes, I mean, the Torah is describing her as the woman who prays. But I'm skipping over her. And maybe you're going to accuse me of favoring my namesake. But I am going to go to Rachel. And here is a picture of her gravesite. Unfortunately, instead of a tree, there are bulletproof walls surrounding it. And I was lucky enough just to be there just 2 weeks ago. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about Rachel's prayer. So Rachel's prayer is not mentioned in the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash. It's mentioned in the prophet Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu. He talks about, when Yirmiyahu talks about the ingathering of the Jewish people, the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel after their 70-year exile in Babylon, modern-day Iran, he inserts this mysterious description of seemingly what precipitated, what inspired, what caused this return of the Jewish people, what will cause. He's prophesizing here. What will cause the return of the Jewish people to the homeland after the 70 years of exile? And he says like this: a voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children and refuses to be comforted, for they are not. They are not comforted, so she's not going to be comforted either. So says the Lord, refrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears. For there is reward for your work, says the Lord. They shall come back from the land of their enemy. And there is hope for your future, says the Lord. And the children shall return to their borders. So here, Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, is giving us a sneak peek into what's going on in heaven right now, right here, as the Jews are being led to exile during the time of Jeremiah. And he's saying, you guys can't hear this, but let me expose this conversation going on right now. Your mother, Rachel, is devastated right now. She will not let up. No. Nothing could appease her. And God had to come and personally appease her. What a dramatic description that Yirmiyahu brings about Rachel. In fact, Rashi, quoting the Medrash, says that there's another layer of this drama, of this story, that Yirmiyahu is making us privy to. What happened was, all the matriarchs and patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, went to appease God concerning the sin of Manasseh. Manasseh was a king, a Jewish king, who placed an image, an idol in the temple, but God was not appeased. Then Rachel entered and stated before him, O Lord of the universe, whose mercy is greater, your mercy or the mercy of a flesh and blood, a human? You must admit that your mercy is greater. Now, did I not bring my rival, meaning my sister, into my house? For all the work that Jacob worked for my father, he worked only for me. When I entered the nuptial canopy, they brought my sister, and it was not enough that I kept my silence, but I gave her my password. You too, if your children brought your rival into your house, keep your silence for them. God said to her, you have defended them. Good enough. I don't know what Abraham said. Maybe he said, God, I brought up my son to you. Isaac said I was willing to be sacrificed. Apparently, that didn't work. When Rachel said this, God said, what do they say? I fold. So here we have another very, very explicit, dramatic story of a conversation to God, aka a prayer, that was so powerful and was said by a woman. So now here's my question to you. Any similarities between the prayer of Hannah and the prayer of Rachel? And if you could also just put any thought that you'd like into this answer box. Any thoughts about Rachel's prayer, Hannah's prayer, anything that it brings to mind? Pain, prayer from the heart, silence, They were both sad, sacrifice. No mention of husband praying in both. Wow. You could say that the Talmud says that the husbands did try, but it wasn't enough. And assumedly, Hannah's husband also prayed for her. But that wasn't enough either. Prayer for children. Nice. Genuine pain and suffering. Request comfort for her children. They were both crying. Awesome. And if there's people that didn't and still want to contribute, please do. So, two very powerful prayers. You know, there was a Hasidic Rebbe, the Belzer Rebbe, who built a beautiful shul in Yerushalayim. Here it is. And he was very much involved in the planning of every single detail of the shul. He would personally go to see, how it was progressing. And at some point, it wasn't fully done, but it was done enough to be in use. I don't know if they had a CO. Is that what it's called? The CO yet? What is it called? C of O. C of O. I don't know if they had the C of O yet. I don't know if, in Israel, I don't know if people are so careful about having a C of O before they use things. But his followers, his Hasidim said, I think we can use it this Shabbos. So he said, no, we can't use it this Shabbos. They said, but Rebbe, it's finished. And they said, no, but the women's section is not finished. And they said, the women's section doesn't need to be finished in order for us to pray there. And he responded as follows. The Talmud says that after the destruction of the temple, many gates of prayer were locked. Prayer was not as accessible anymore. But there's one gate of prayer that is never closed, and that is the gate of tears. And women have a greater tendency to pray with tears. And therefore, I need my prayers to be attached to the women's section because I'm more confident that their prayers will ascend to heaven than I am if it was just my prayers alone. And therefore, I will not pray in this beautiful, beautiful temple if there's no women's section. In Hebrew, the term is Sha'arei Dimaos Lo Nina'alu. The gate of tears is never closed. There's a beautiful song with those words as well. So, if we've established anything, by the way, on that note, going back to Rachel, there was a great Jewish leader who directed his comments to Rachel. He said, Rachel, I know God said, stop crying because I'm going to bring the Jewish people back to the temple. And we did after 70 years. But unfortunately, 420 years later, we were kicked out of Israel again and the temple was destroyed again. So this rabbi said, Rachel, or the way he put it, Mama Rachel, our epic mother, Rachel, don't ever stop crying. You're not off the hook. It wasn't just that one time. You need to continue crying. God listened to you the first time. Please keep crying. And there's also a song about that, Mama Rachel, cry for us again. That was based on what this rabbi said, his insight. Rachel, please stop. Please continue to cry for us. So if we've established one thing, I hope it is that the prayers of women are very much valued by God, by all of the Jewish people. They're heartfelt. Sometimes they're full of tears. They're demanding, they're assertive, they're honest, they're heartbreaking. They're often on behalf of others, involve sacrifice. Everything that you wrote and more represents prayer of a woman. Which brings us to the question, why are women on the other side of a mechitzah? They should be like the spotlight of the shul. That's what the Talmud says. We learn how to pray from Chana. So why are they relegated there? So we're going to address we're going to look at it from two perspectives, and then we're going to wrap up with another last thought. But the first perspective is that the model of the synagogue today is structured after the model of the temple, the Bet HaMikdash. And the temple was God's design. God was the blueprint. God was the architect. He made the blueprint. He shared the structure with King David, who shared it with his son Solomon, Shlomo, who ultimately built the first temple. And in this structure, the men and the women were separate. As you could see there, the women were on top and the men were on the bottom. Somebody once asked one of the Rebbe's secretariats, Rabbi Chadakov, if they should make a separate prayer group just for women. Like maybe a separate time of services just for women. Right? I mean, I've been on many occasions, in Shabbatons and women's groups and retreats, you have just women davening, and there's something so beautiful about that. But this would have been like part of the schedule, not an exception. Like the men have their own times for praying and the women have their own times for praying. And Rabbi Chadakov responded by saying just this, that in the temple, women prayed side by side. And so too, in our temple, we need women to pray side by side. Like the Belzer Rebbe said, I won't go into a shul that doesn't have a women's section. I need the women. So there's something healthy about that dynamic. Going back to the first verse, Isaac prayed opposite Rebekah. Both of them, with both of their assets and both of their vital locations in the room, did the trick. It's like the yin and the yang. It's like the two pieces of the puzzle that go together. So in this, as you see here, this is not Mechitzah style. This is another very common way that a lot of shuls have, where you have the men and women on different floors, which is also perfectly acceptable. Why did God orchestrate the temple to look like this? Well, we can't fully understand God's master plan, but we could guess. And one of the reasons that that kind of makes sense is that we want to minimize distraction. Because ideally, prayer is a time that we are focused on God. And fostering that special relationship that we have with God. And that's a really hard thing to do. Prayer could be one of the hardest mitzvahs for that area. You can't really multitask. I mean, you could, but you're trying not to. So you can do a lot of other things simultaneously. You could do a lot of mitzvahs without thinking about God. But when it comes to prayer, thinking about God is front and center. And we try to do what we can to minimize distraction. For a man, it involves putting a tallis, which is kind of there to block the peripheral vision and to keep them in their own little cocoon. A woman perhaps doesn't need that. It's easier for her, somewhat easier, to keep that focus. Or at least, like many other mitzvahs that contain symbols of what to remember, like the tzitzis and the yarmulke, a woman is meant to do the same thing, but she doesn't need to be wearing it to remember that God is over her head. So, do you mind if we wait till the end? I would love to take the questions. But no, I want. So, when you have men and women, guys and girls in the same room, it's only natural that you're thinking about socializing a little bit more. And I've heard from many people that do go to synagogues that have mixed seating, that it does become a little more of a pressure or a social activity. And there's nothing wrong with social activities. But in this context of trying our hardest to focus on just God and my relationship with God, it could be easier to express ourselves authentically if we don't have to think about how am I projecting? What does that person think about me? Of course, we could think about that when we're in a group of women as well. There's, of course, always that self-conscious element, but it minimizes it. A rabbi that I know was once interviewed on a radio show, and he was asked this question: why does the Torah, the code of Jewish law, prescribe that men and women should be sitting separately? And he said, well, I know for me, for us men, it's so that we don't think about the other women that are in the synagogue. Or he said, we don't think that way. We're not thinking about our wives and our attraction to our wives at that moment. Attraction to our wives is a wonderful thing, but we want to try and really focus on God. So the radio host said to him, Rabbi, are you kidding? If I was sitting in a synagogue next to my wife, you think I would be thinking about being attracted to my wife? So the rabbi said, well, I don't know about you, but if my wife was sitting next to me, I would be thinking about my attraction towards her. And if you're not, then you're possibly thinking about your attraction to other women who is not your wife. But when it comes to us women, the ability to be authentic, the freedom to cry, think about Hannah's tears, Rachel's tears, requires a safe space. And that space is safer when it's within the context of people that pray in the same way. And from that perspective, we can almost grasp the logic behind why God wanted this to be the ideal prayer structure as he set up in the temple and in every mini temple afterwards. Now, you may be thinking, okay, that would make sense. Men and women, different energies, different side of the room, temple, Isaac and Rivka. That would make sense, except for the fact that, we're behind the Mechitzah. We don't have the minyan. We don't have the real deal prayer. We're just observing the prayer, which I'm sure is something that many women feel when they're in a shul in which there's a mechitzah. So I want to talk about that for a minute. Does the minyan, the quorum of 10 men, does that authenticate the prayer more than just a woman praying alone? Again, we have our role models of Hannah, Rachel, we mentioned Leah. Their prayers were answered, and they were not part of a group of 9 other women or men for that matter. That wasn't part of what we're not modeling them for, clicking together. The 10 makes it whole, and then snap, God answers your prayers. God answered them, and they were alone. So what is the 10? What is the quorum of 10 all about? The one very legitimate and beautiful answer traces its roots back to the story of the 10 spies, the 12 spies who went out to scout out the land of Israel. 10 of them came back with a negative report. And God said something very critical about these 10 spies. He says, Ad masai le'eda hara'a hazos. How long will this Ada, this congregation, be bad? And it was just 10 of them. Who would have thought that 10 is like a whole congregation, a group? But that is the source for the fact that a congregation is 10. And therefore, when people congregate to pray, they do it with a minimum of 10 people. But here is something interesting. The Torah goes out of its way to teach us that it was only the men who were scared about going into the land of Israel, who listened to the bad testimony of the spies. Where does the Torah make this distinction? Later on, when it talks about the Benos Tzalafchad, the 5 daughters of Tzalafchad who came to Moshe and begged for a portion of the land of Israel, the Talmud points out the juxtaposition between the spies who rejected the land and the 5 daughters of Tzalafchad who fought for the land. And the Talmud says, look at the difference between men and women. In fact, at the beginning of the story of the spies, God says to Moshe, Shlach lecha anoshim, send men to scout out the land. And some of the commentaries say that that word anoshim, men, is very important because God was alluding to something. It's because they're men that they're going to have a negative report. This was a commentary that predated feminism by a few hundred years. If it was a woman that Moshe had sent out, they certainly wouldn't have come back with dissuading people from entering into the land. So it's not just a coincidence that we use the idea that a congregation is 10, and therefore to congregate and pray, you need 10 people. It's not just a coincidence. It's actually a direct rectification for this mistake that the 10 men and other men that listened to them made in the desert. Every time 10 men get together, they're undoing part of that negative energy. They're saying, we're 10 men and we're getting together to show our faith in God. And that's undoing and fixing. That's a tikkun for the 10 men that came to give this negative report about Israel and cause the Jewish people to reject it. So the woman, they don't need that rectification. They did the opposite. They pushed to go into the land. And therefore, a woman doesn't need that group of 10 for her prayers to be fully accepted. It's not a thing. God's like, I don't need that. You don't need to be part of that puzzle. You don't need to undo any negative taint on Jewish womankind. No. It's good. You're good. So when they're counting the men and we're like, I'm here. What am I, chopped liver? No. You never made that mistake. So you're not really applicable to reverse that mistake. You're good exactly as you are. In fact, you don't even need to come to the shul. You're welcome to. And apparently your coming to the shul opens up the gate of tears and gives that special feminine touch to the prayer. But I want to present one more, 5, 10? 10, okay. I got a 10. Oh, nice. Nice. I want to present one more idea, and this was shared by Rabbi Ari Raskin, who wrote a beautiful book called Thank You, God, for Making Me a Woman, which is ironic because he's not a woman. But it's a great book. And he presents the following idea based on a teaching of the Rebbe. The Rebbe, when the Torah discusses the counting of the Jewish people, dissects and analyzes the deeper meaning behind counting. Okay, so a minyan, the word minyan means counting. Unlike now minyan has a whole new meaning, right? Now minyan means those little yellow balls with the one eye. The minions. But before minyan meant that, minyan meant a quorum of 10 men. But the word minyan means to count. Doesn't mean the word 10, right? It means to count. So there's something about counting those men that is important. And the Rebbe, not in connection to the minyan of 10 men, but in connection to counting the Jewish people in the desert, talks about what is the significance of counting. And the Jews are counted over and over in the Torah, and yet at the same time, we don't like to count. If you've ever seen or if you've ever counted, maybe you know that we say not 1, not 2, right? So there's also something like that we're a little bit wary of when it comes to counting. what does counting really mean? How is it? Obviously, it's, for functional reasons, you need to count, and sometimes you need to count people to make sure you didn't lose anybody. But what does the counting represent on a spiritual plane? And the Rebbe says, let's look at what God instructed Moshe. He said, Moshe, when it comes to the whole Jewish people, aside for the tribe of Levi, the Levites, you count them. When it comes to the Levites, all the descendants of Levi, I'm going to count them. Don't worry, I got this. I'll save you the effort. And when it comes to Aaron, your brother, don't count him. He's from Levi, right? He's a descendant of Levi. Levi was one of the 12 sons of Jacob. But don't count him. I want your sum total to be minus Aaron. And the Rebbe's like, what's up with that? And who cares? It's just a number. What does it matter if you count them, if I count them? Oh, no, don't count. Don't count Aaron. Like, why? So the Rebbe says, because counting has a very deep significance. Counting is when you are attributing a tangible number to a person. You're giving them a job. Like, this is their assignment. You're number 1, you sweep the floor. You're number 2, you wash the dishes. Okay, now we have 10 people, 10 jobs, or 20 people, 20 jobs. And on a spiritual plane, the counting represents the fact that all Jewish people have certain mitzvahs that they need to do. And all of those are done through their natural means. And think about how many Jewish people there are. We have a number. And that's how many workers we have to do God's plan in this world. That's how much manpower we have to do the physical mitzvot. The more people, the more manpower. When it comes to the tribe of Levi, their work is a little bit more refined. They took care of the temple. They weren't planting, plowing, doing business. Their work was, it's hard to quantify what they did. I don't know, maybe it seems like they did nothing. They were just guarding the temple for 10 hours. But God says, I know it doesn't look like much to you, but to me, that was really important. So they're operating on a less materialistic plane. Their accomplishments are more noticed by me than by you. So let me do the counting. Do me a favor. Let me take care of them. I'll check them off the list. When it comes to Aaron, the priest, his work is so ephemeral, so spiritual. Counting him would be like an insult. Like you're giving him a 1. You don't even know what he does. Plus, you can't pin him to one job. He's busy making peace between men and women, as the Torah teaches us. The Talmud explains. He's out there bringing people closer to Torah. Plus, he's in the temple doing the most pristine work. Don't give him a 1. I'm not even going to count him. And the Rebbe says this is the significance of counting. Counting means that your work is action-oriented, very good, but action-oriented, quantifiable, qualifiable. The more sublime the work, the less counting is relevant. And when it comes to Aaron, counting is irrelevant. It's not matim, doesn't work. So Rabbi Raskin says, I think that there's also a hint here about the counting of men, the minyan. The word means counting. It doesn't mean 10, it means counting. That process, 1, 2, 3, 10. That's not a woman's work. It's not quantifiable like that. Sometimes her work is not even that noticeable. But God said, in my book, it's above 1. It's hard to pinpoint what it is. And that really applies for many mitzvot, specifically time-bound mitzvot, that a woman is not obligated to do. She can for most of them, but she's not obligated. Just like she can be with 10 women. That's fine. but you don't need to, because giving her that time limitation is limiting. Just like you can't limit or really quantify the work that many women do, the work that a mother does. It's very hard to say. Like the New York Times Magazine said that a woman who has 1.5 children should be making $150,000 a year. This was actually like 15 years ago. So now with inflation, a lot more. If you calculate all of her jobs and put them together. But of course, it's much more than that. The sum is so much greater than the parts. But I want to conclude with this last thought. A woman may not be as connected to a minyan, to the counting, or to time-bound mitzvahs. But when it comes to other mitzvos that are actually not time-bound, but constant, she has an even greater connection to them. And those are called the mitzvos timidios. They are mitzvos that are applicable 24 hours a day, or at least in our waking conscious hours. And they are to believe in the unity of God, to love God, to fear God. Those are mitzvos that she's connected to on a very, very deep level. They transcend time. They just are. Like, she doesn't need the yarmulke. She just is the yarmulke. Yarmulke represents Yarei Malka, fearing God. We're representing that there's something that transcends my opinion. How does a woman foster those feminine mitzvot? So I'm sorry, they're mitzvot for men and women, the constant mitzvos, but mitzvos that she has an extra special connection to. And that, says the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is through the study of Hasidut, Jewish mysticism. That a woman has a special connection and affinity to Torah study, and especially the part of Torah study that is the soul of Torah, because that fuels her faith in God, her love and appreciation of God, her respect for the fact that her life has a purpose and a mission that's greater than she could comprehend. And that's really the true power of a woman, the true power of a woman's prayer. The woman's prayer, like Hannah and like Rachel, that pierced the heavens, that God is always listening to with an eye, so with his ear close to planet Earth, or right here, his ear right here next to our mouth, listening to our prayers as Jewish women. And like Rachel, our collective prayer is Vishavu Banim Ligvulam, that all of our children and all of the Jewish people should return to our legitimate borders in the land of Israel with the coming of Mashiach.